Good afternoon, everybody. Councilman Blair here. Glad to have you out there. It is a little past 2:30. We were chatting and lost track of time, at least I did. So thank you again for joining us today. This is the Mayor's Commission on Water and Sewer Connection. You all, I hope and assume, have your agendas, and we do have all the things in order for today's meeting. It looks like we have a quorum, and Carrie will go ahead and do a roll call for this meeting.
Okay. If everyone will just raise their hand, I will put it down through the roll call. Councilman Blair?
Here.
Jane Orr? Jane, I see you on there. Can you raise your hand?
There she is.
All right. Thank you, Jane. Mark Matupsky? Thank you, Mark. Millie Owens? Millie, I believe you're logged in as Grover Owens. Can you raise your hand?
It was up.
Thank you, Millie. Sherry Hanna is absent today. Jim Hazelbaker? Thank you, Mr. Hazelbaker. Mike Breen? Thank you, Mr. Breen. And Sandy Griffiths is absent today. I'm going to lower all the hands. Okay.
Perfect. We have a quorum, so we have one adjustment from Carrie on the item C, approval of the minutes from December 16th. Go ahead, Carrie.
On December 16th, we made one adjustment. Thank you, Millie. For group number 3 is actually the most difficult to implement. So may I have someone raise their hand to move to approve these minutes from December 16th?
You don't mind if I have this on?
Thank you, Millie. May I have a second? Thank you, Jim. And if everyone can raise if they're in favor? Thank you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and lower hands. And now we have item D.
Approval of minutes for January 19th, 2021. I know that everybody has received those meeting minutes. Is there any additions or corrections from the members? If not, we'll entertain a motion or approval by Carrie.
Okay, I don't have any hands raised for any revisions. Mark, I'm going to lower your hand. Can I have a move to approve? Thank you, Mr. Hazelbaker. Can I have a second? Thank you, Millie. And everyone, raise your hand if they're in favor.
Okay. Tough way to do it.
Okay, thank you.
That's a tough way to do it. Okay, so we are now approved on item C, minutes from December 16th, and approved on minutes January 19th. Thank you, everybody. Now we'll move on, and this will probably be a fairly short meeting. We'll move on to item E, which is a revised draft policy review and discussion, and Gwen will lead that one.
Okay. Thanks for being here with us today, everyone. As Councilman Blair pointed out, we only had a few minor changes from the last draft, so I'm not going to go through the policy or the draft policy in its entirety. We're just going to go through those sections that were changed. If you can scroll a little bit for me, Carrie, to page 2. So the first change was a clarification to the residential, the single-family residential. The clarification was reworded to state that the policy would only apply to individual residential dwelling units, new subdivisions, and multifamily residential and commercial projects must construct and connect to city sewer as a condition of receiving water. So this policy is primarily centered around individual residential dwelling units. Does anyone have any questions about that new language that would clarify this in terms of the applicability of the policy?
Anybody has questions, raise your hand, please, so Carrie can acknowledge you, please.
Okay, the next change is, here under item number 2. So, thank you, Mr. Matupsky, for pointing out that we had a small conflict between new home construction that is not adjacent to or abutting a sewer main, and new sewer mains that would be built under this policy in the 12 unsewered areas. In order to provide a distinction between the two, an additional sentence was added at the end, that this policy would only apply to parcels that are located outside of the 12 unsewered areas identified in the Corolla report dated December 2020. If you'll recall, there were over 300 individual parcels that are on septic, that receive city water, that are outside of the 12 areas. So this item number 2 would apply to those 300 plus parcels.
Anybody with any questions or concern about that addition? Has everybody, I suppose, gone through and read the draft policy? I guess at this point in time, it's your last chance at the bite of the apple to make your comments. This is probably going to be our last meeting of all the people that have been here and have been very active. This policy will move forward to the Water Issues Committee, then on to Prescott City Council for a vote. So if you have comments, this would be a good time to do that.
And Millie has her hand up. Millie, I'm gonna allow you to talk. Please unmute.
Under cost responsibility, fees and funding, 2B, that is still included. And do you know why? Because I suggested we take that out at our meeting and it was left in.
So Millie was the only commissioner that voiced the opinion to remove it. Unless a majority of the group want to remove it, I left it in the policy.
Okay, because it doesn't state how long or how much. So it's kind of a...
I guess, Millie, my question to you would be, only looking from the outside in, if we took it out, what would you expect to replace it with as far as being able to pay for it?
Well, since we're not paying for it now, or have not been paying for it for the last almost 60 years.
So Millie, I'm going to suggest that the fees and penalties that are being suggested be a part of the policy. Those are going to require some more work to determine how much those fees might be, which ones the council would feel were reasonable to adopt. So I don't know that we're necessarily saying that all of these fees under number 2 would be adopted. They're simply suggestions from this commission of things that could be done for the council to consider.
Okay, I was afraid with it being open-ended that it might present a problem to the property owners, not currently. And if it takes 20 years to get to the most difficult areas, that's a long time to be paying full charge.
Well, remember, this is a draft policy, Millie, and that it has to be vetted through the Water Issues Committee and then on to City Council. So they'll look at exactly what we all have been looking at, and they'll make their determination and their judgment, and then we'll move forward with that.
Right, but I was just afraid that that would be our recommendation, and I don't think that is quite true.
Okay? Thank you for your comment.
And Jim Hazelbaker, go ahead and unmute yourself.
I did not have a question.
Okay, then I'm going to lower your hand.
Okay. Sorry.
No worries. Mike Breen, please please unmute yourself.
There you go. Hello?
Hi,
Yeah,
Mike.
a number of comments. I sent some information on to Carrie, some questions I had that didn't seem to be addressed. I did meet with Matt. I looked at their study, and I was, my curiosity is we've created priority areas based on the ease of construction. And the study in question, the Corolla study, is studying the effect on the Bennett Basin water drainage area and its effects on Watson Lake. The area out at Antelope Hills where I live wasn't part of that study. So to prioritize that as a high, it's like two sets of priority items. I was thinking that we haven't really discussed the priority being the effect on the water systems, the drain, and not what's the easiest to build. So that would be one comment. It did note in one of the responses that there are 6,000 new septic systems added in the last 10 years. And there's got to be a lot sitting around in the city. I've asked for that information from Suzanne Ehrlich, but I didn't get it yet. But my concern is that all those people that are with septic, no water, are also contributing to the problem, but they're not going to be part of any of the payments if they're not a water user or a sewer user. They're a septic and a well user, can be contributing significantly to the problem, yet not contributing overall to the community's effort to alleviate the problem that they're distinguishing with the Corolla study. Couple other things that I noticed at one point we were talking about water cost or amounts of savings. I know that Mr. Mechanic had put in some information. I did some math on it, and I think he was pretty right that water that we're recovering could be purchased at probably 1/10 of the cost of what the recovery cost of putting in a $80 million project. That being said, that I know at the last meeting they said that the real issue was affecting the aquifer, or not the aquifer, but the drainage basin and the pollutants going into the system. But I think we haven't looked at the areas that are the ones that are based on that study are actually doing the most polluting, and treating those as the areas, if that's our goal, those as the areas to work on first, areas that don't really impact the water system, the last priority, especially if we're trying to conform to what the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, or EPA, might be directing us to do. They would probably be directing us to fix the drainage problems, where the drainage problems are feeding into the water system, as opposed to some of the outlying areas that are not close, and there's no studies to prove that they're actually polluting. I did also hear at an earlier meeting, and nobody ever addressed it, that this would increase property owners' values. I don't think we really looked into that. So to be able to report that out as a finding, we never had any information from appraisers who could corroborate whether that is a net effect. My feeling, quite honestly, is that like a solar system pays for itself, but a septic system that's on the books for years and years have a negative impact if people have it as a assessment that has to be paid when somebody's looking to buy their property. And the last thing I had was, I know that you mentioned there was a 1950s policy related to hooking up in 18 months across the country. I've seen quite common to not have people required to hook up until their septic systems fail. Obviously, we don't have the money to do that and wait. But the fact that we have this policy that's based on some 1950s, something the city was doing in 1950, I'd be curious to see if we can incorporate that going forward. If you're telling, going to have to tell this to the populace, they probably would have something to that effect where you could demonstrate policies of 1950 that are carried over into the policy that's in this document. That's all I have for now. Might have something later.
Thank you, Mike.
Sure.
We also have comments from Jane Orr. Jane, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Hi, Jane.
Hi. One thing, I had my volume down and I couldn't hear the approval of the minutes. And I needed to tell you, I was not at the December 16th meeting. And it looks like I am showing as having been there. So I don't know if it's too late to amend that or not. And the second thing is, after this meeting, since this is our last, you're saying, and it will go to the city council from here, at what point does the public weigh in?
I'm gonna let Craig go through that. I'm not sure exactly what that process looks like. What we need to do is know that our work here probably is done in a large way, and it's gonna go, like I said, to the Water Issues Committee, and then will be vetted through them. And then there'll be a process put in place, and I'm not sure what that looks like yet, through the city management and through Craig about how it gets presented and what the next steps are after that. So when do we engage the public? We choose a...
We were envisioning that we would discuss it with the Water Issues Committee next, and then come forward to council in a study session, presentation type. So then that's when it gets rolled out, brought out to all of the public in the study session. And we get, comments, questions, everything from that. And then I guess depending on how that comes out, then whether we have another study session to address things, or then we come back to council on a voting consideration.
Yeah, and I guess the voting and receiving the authorization to go ahead with finalization of this policy is number one. But I think, Jane, maybe more so to your concern is when council and engineering decides which project they're gonna move to first, and when we start having those individual public meetings. Would that be more correct?
Then there will be detailed discussions and review in those individual projects as well.
Does that answer your question, Jane?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for your question, appreciate it.
And Millie has an additional question. Millie, go ahead and unmute.
How much input can the people have that have not a clue about what we have been doing? Because there's no like a water rebate incentive postcard that did not go out to inform them that we have been working on this.
I suspect it would have to, once Water Issues has an agenda set, those are all public meetings, so the public can join Water Issues at that point and make comments. Also, like Craig mentioned, there would probably be one or maybe two study sessions in front of council for public comments, so there's gonna be at least 2 to 3 more times. So those will be identified on the city website and noticed as public meetings, and that's the best way that I know that the people you're talking about will be able to understand when the meetings are gonna be.
Okay, and how much notice will they have?
I would say the agendas are written for Water Issues a month in advance, so there would be at least a 2-week.
Posted one 5 days in advance.
Okay, so 5 days in advance on the website, not only for city council, but also for Water Issues. So I suppose, because if you're a voice in your community, I suppose when that comes out, because the list is short, maybe we can have Carrie or somebody notify each one of the folks that are on the committee to put it out through their public venues to to maybe get more participation. Would that help, Millie?
Very much.
Okay. I think, Carrie, would that be okay to do? Once we determine that we're going to have a meeting at Water Issues, that Carrie will, or somebody from Public Works will notify each one of the members to notify their collective groups out there so they can make public comment. Okay?
Jane Orr has additional questions or comments?
Well, I was just gonna say, the public is aware that we're having these meetings or that there is this committee just from having read it in the paper. So,
Yeah, these have all been public as well.
right. And I'm wondering, is there anything going to be in the paper again that kind of gives an update to those articles or that one article that was in?
That would be up to the courier, but we'll also keep these meetings and access to them on the website. So then when we are talking about it coming forward for a study session, if there's anyone that wants to become, aware of and educated on what has gone on, what all of you have done, then they'll be able to go back and check these meetings.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
Mike Green, go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, I had mentioned to Carrie the other day that based on the age demographics of my neighborhood, I'm sure many of the others, not many people are on Zoom and in the age of COVID, I would think we're not giving fair access to people that come to meetings. They're not going to risk their health to come to a meeting if it's in the near future until we have a better handle on it. Are the public meetings such that they are going to be conducive to a sizable crowd? This is going to be a big issue. You got a lot of money on the line. A lot of people having to fix their own properties.
Well, Mike, I think
I'm concerned that we won't be able to get a sampling of the people who are concerned at a meeting if it isn't on Zoom.
I think the best way I can respond to that is depending how long this whole process takes and how the COVID world turns out in the next 6 months will give us a good idea of whether we have to meet in small 10 people groups, social distance in each neighborhood and have 2 or 3 of them opposed to 1. That is something that will be determined, but our plan is, hopefully, is to be out there in the public, whether we're masked up or not, and then people will have to make the decision of whether they show up or they don't show up.
Yeah, I know we had public meetings for like the Deepwell Ranch at the Centennial Center. It was overflowing. Hundreds of people wanted to attend that. So I know there'll be big interest when something of this nature comes up. I'm just worried that we won't be able to have the type of input structure that is going to be conducive to people not feeling that they didn't have a good chance to just partake and give some information without risking their health. I think that's an important consideration.
We will do it. We will do everything we can to mitigate those concerns. And as each day goes by, as you well know, we're getting more and more information, more and more vaccines are going out. It's not like it was a year ago, it's improving. So we only can hope for continued improvement, and we'll based upon what we do based upon those improvements.
Jane Orr has a comment. Jane, go ahead and unmute.
I just want to know I guess maybe I should know this, but is this something the public will even vote upon? Or is it all up to the city council to approve it based on how the public has received it, sort of thing?
Well, from my standpoint, I'm only one council person. We all have heard, and even today in the selection of a new council candidate, the importance of taking septic tanks off of the system and making them a sanitary system, improving our water quality. This is something council's been pushing on for the 20 years I've been there. Yeah. We're reaching out one more time, and we are going to put in place every year engineering and a construction plan, and we're going to move ahead with it. But we do want to make sure the public's involved in it. We want to make sure the costs are as inexpensive as they can be for each individual person, and I'm quite sure that will be where the dialogue is most generated. So when we reach the point of the decision of which area we're going to go to first, that I would suspect will kick up more public conversation and have more meetings to make sure everybody understands what we're doing.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Jane. Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Hazelbeck.
Jim, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes. I was sitting here listening to this and I looked down at the existing home connecting to the new sewer main. I think one of the things that's going to really have to be explained to these people more, not so much what we need to do, but how it's going to be financed, how it's going to impact them. I live down in an area, Steve knows where I live. It's mainly retired people. And you start talking to people where it's going to cost them $26,000 to $30,000 to hook into a sewer that's running outside in front of their house. Or they may have to go through 2 or 3 properties to hook up to it. The cost of this thing, and I hate to keep going back to that cost, but that's going to determine whether you get a lot of people in favor of it or a lot of people opposed to it.
And Jim, I think at the end of the day, the game will be on the city's shoulders to look at those engineering plans as they're updated and come with a realistic number, not just a splot on the wall that we're trying to pretend like it's a number. We will know exactly what that number will be, and I think at that point in time, that's when we'll make that determination of whether people are on board or not on board.
Well, that and the finance, how they're going to finance it and how they're going to pay for it, Steve.
Yes, sir, that's right. And we'll
lot.
have that all done. Mark Woodfield's been sitting in every single meeting listening. That is part of the whole overall picture. So we'll just have to wait as each one of these areas unfold to see what the engineer says and see what our finance levels are and how we can group them together or maybe get WIFA loans or whatever the case may be. But we have to have a jumping off point, and this policy is where we jump off.
Right. That's what needs to be explained to the people.
Okay. Appreciate that, Jim.
You're welcome, sir.
Definitely what we have in the policy here that we've all been working on is you just threw out there $26,000. We do not have any consideration in this policy to make individual homeowners responsible for that cost. That is not the way the policy is set up.
Okay.
Millie Owens has another comment. Go ahead and unmute, Millie. Actually, she lowered her hand. Mark Matupsky, go ahead and unmute.
Good afternoon, everyone. I guess first off, I want to say thank you to Public Works staff, Carollo, and other commission members for all the effort that has gone into this draft policy. I know that there still remain questions, but it does, as Councilman Blair pointed out, gives the Water Issues Committee and potentially the City Council and the community a basis for beginning and continuing the discussion, understanding that, there will be changes and adjustments, priorities will be reconfigured based on more input and more understanding and information. This is a necessary policy and it will benefit the city, our community in the long term over the next 25 years. And I'm encouraged by it. And I think that we will find a way to work through it with the community and hopefully obtain a solution that is implementable over the next 25 years. So thank you all for your efforts and input, and it's been a pleasure to be a part.
Thanks, Mark.
And Mike Breen, go ahead and unmute. Mike, you have your hand up?
Carrie, maybe want to mention that we'll get to public comment after the committee members.
You just did.
Well, it
we will do public comment. I see a hand up from the public, so we will do public comment once we've finished with our member comments. Millie, go ahead and unmute.
Okay, I just want to reiterate the 63% return into the recharge needs to be carefully explained versus the cost.
Thank you, Billy.
Thank you.
And Mike Green, one more chance. I have your hand up. You want to unmute? Try one more time, Mike.
There we go. All right. Yeah, one other thing I know has come up is, I know the people, as the last gentleman said, everybody's going to be concerned, all the homeowners that are affected will be concerned with the development of what it's going to entail on their own properties to get a sewer line from their existing exit point back to a sewer. I heard talk at some time that there would be companies that would be organized that could do it all, and I don't know of any companies that do all those things. And my constituents here were saying, well, I'm going to have to find a septic and a plumber and a landscape. They had a lot of different things they were going to have to organize on a project they've never done before. It's not just like putting in a kitchen counter. So I heard some talk that some people that would probably find some companies that would give us discounts and be capable of doing all phases of that project for a homeowner. Is there anybody working on that? That's my question.
Not at the present time, because we haven't got to that level yet. However, we know, working with YCCA and with our own contractors here at the city, that there will be people out there be interested in bidding on the project as a whole. It will be cheaper to do it as a whole. It'll be cheaper to hook up through one or two individual contractors to mobilize to do it all at once, which will indeed keep the costs down. And likewise, there will be landscaping companies right behind that will be interested in doing landscape work and fixing the property. So when we get there, it'll all have to come together, but this is not really the time to do that. Okay, thanks, Mike. Let's go ahead and take public comment.
Howard Mechanic, go ahead and unmute.
Okay, I just had one question. After the Corolla study was presented, I had a few issues, and I know other people did too. And I talked to Craig. He indicated that would come back, an updated version, because there were a few errors in there. I just wanted to check to see if that updated version will be available to the public before the Water Issues Committee meeting.
Yeah, Mr. Mechanic, you're referring to your two properties that were excluded?
I'm referring to that, and I think there were a couple other issues. I don't, are they updating anything that was brought up at that meeting?
We will get an updated report from them. They're waiting for us to tell them that it's complete. So that is something that we will have, and we'll get it up on the website as soon as we have it.
Okay, thank you.
And Leslie Hoy, go ahead and unmute.
Okay, hi, everybody. I have two questions. First, well, maybe three.
Okay, now you only three.
Only three.
Okay, Mr. Dotson said that there's nothing in the policy about making the homeowners responsible for the cost. And
the total cost, Leslie.
Oh, for the total cost. Okay, but it still stands that the homeowner is going to be responsible for the cost on their own property. Is that correct?
That's what's in the policy, correct.
Okay, I've been at all these meetings, and of course I'm not a commissioner and haven't been able to see all the paperwork, but it seems to me that the commissioners aren't really all on board with that. But I know this has to go to the Water Issues Committee and the council first, but I think it's going to be critical that there's opportunity for the public to weigh in on this, and even for the part where the rest of the public is paying for the cost other than what's on the homeowner's property. And I want to make it clear that I think it's good to get rid of the septics, but I think there's so many issues that are left unresolved, and it's not really adequate. For instance, it's not adequate to say, oh, this is going to go to the Water Issues Committee and that's a public meeting. You know, there's usually only like 2 people from the public, and I'm one of them at the Water Issues Committee. Those meetings aren't in the paper, and just saying that it's on the city website, well, so many people, they never go to the city website. So a lot more has to be done because this is a huge project. There's a huge cost to every citizen. And I believe Millie mentioned the return to recharge versus the cost needs to be carefully explained. I wrote down because it is a high amount of money to pay for the amount of acre feet that are going to be obtained. And that's over, you know, a 25-year period. Then another thing that's really bothered me about this from the beginning is I don't feel like the purpose of the project has ever been made completely clear. Is it to protect water quality, in which case the properties that are impacting water quality, as I think Commissioner Breen pointed out at a previous meeting, there's a lot of properties where they're not near any water. Or is the purpose to obtain the effluent recharge? So before this goes to the public, I think someone needs to work on being able to state clearly what is the purpose. It's hard to solve. Pardon me?
We stated all along what the purpose of this committee is. It's very crystal clear why we're doing this.
Okay, would you repeat that then?
Go ahead, Gwen.
So the first part of the policy, Leslie, is about the mission and the goals of this policy. So it's both of the things that you speak about. It is to reduce the environmental impacts as well as to increase recharge of effluent here within the city. So it's both of those things, and there's the entire first page of the policy is dedicated to the mission and goals of why we're implementing this policy.
And let me say, you don't have to be next to water for your septic tank to influence it. All of North Prescott is not next to water, and they're in fractured rock, and it gets in the creek and it gets into the lake. So that statement, that's not a germane statement either.
Okay, I don't I'm not going to go where I don't have expertise, but I'm just, that CWAG has been doing a lot of research on recharge in general, and I know enough to know that it's not the same in every single area. The amount of recharge, where it goes, and how much could actually be obtained to be usable or useful to the aquifer. So that's outside my area of expertise, but I just know that there's a lot of science involved in that. So I think, anyway, you've addressed my concerns. I just hope that you're really going to do a great job on informing the public, because this is a really important project. But because it's going to cost people a lot of money, they really need to understand it, or otherwise it's just going to blow up in our faces. Thank you for taking my comment.
Thank you, Leslie.
And Jim Karcher, would you unmute, please? Mr. Karcher, can you unmute?
Yes, Yeah, comment is that meeting with Matt, that the biologist that has done some studies relating to pollution. This committee, I've been at about 3 meetings, and I have not really understood how you prioritize these 12 areas. And a good example is that Mike and I live in the Antelope Hills subdivision. That's not even in the study area that Matt was working on. It's outside the study area, yet there's a concern out here. Now, I have 40 years as a design civil engineer for water and sewer systems, and I cannot understand, or I don't think you have any proof that this subdivision is causing any pollution. Yet in your document, you have a statement about penalizing us because of pollution. And I question that this committee has really done a thorough job on ranking and identifying what the pollution is and how you rank each of the 12 areas. I know for a fact that you've been going through a sewer rehab program, and a lot of sewer lines cross streams, and any sewer that leaks from any wastewater that leaks from these sewer mains goes directly into the groundwater untreated, unlike septic tank and drain fields that provide some treatment. And I've seen a lot of studies about the distance away from drain field, how fast the wastewater cleans up. And now our area was a subdivision done by the city, the only subdivision according to your planner that the city actually did. And strangely enough, the subdivision was done in phases. The north part of the Antelope Hills is sewered. The middle part is not sewered. And then the southern area, the south part of the golf course, is sewered. We all have city water. Now, they did that for a reason, but also the city obtained a financial gain by doing the subdivision, and probably sold these lots at a low cost, or a cost that they made money on. But in our area, they could have easily provided sewer, and I don't know why they didn't. So I don't believe this subdivision should have a penalty as indicated in your document. I will
tell you not to get tit for tat, and we'll let Craig respond to it, but I can tell you that the reason why I wasn't provided sewer is because the sewer plant was only one at the time, and it was all pumped uphill, and we didn't have the capability or the ability to handle the sewer at that plant. Now that we have a state-of-the-art plant downhill, it makes sense to take that Antelope Hills septic waste and take it directly to the plant. There is a major difference between now and when the subdivision was built. And I'll let Craig respond to prioritization that you mentioned.
So, Jim, you just mentioned prioritization as well as then Mike did earlier. So the Corolla report is just one method of looking at the areas. And when they put them into groups, it was associated with the existing system being able to serve areas, as well as the cost of construction and or the ease of construction. So that is how those groupings were identified. By no means is the Corolla report the list of priorities of areas that we anticipate going forward with. That's one way of looking at it. We as a city then have got to look at it in relationship to other CIP projects, when it could make the most sense and or benefit from another project to work in. So there's going to be several different ways as far as looking at all areas in order to prioritize them. The Corolla report was just one method of looking at it.
Thank you for your comments. We appreciate them, though, Jim, very much. Okay, so it's now 3:20. I think we have a cleaned up draft document that we've worked towards, and we will put that together. Everybody will be notified when we're gonna present this draft document. All the other elements as far as prioritization and cost and all those things are yet to be determined in the future. This is just the first baby step of something that's been needed for a long time. I appreciate everybody's efforts to be involved in this committee, and we'll keep you informed of how it moves forward through the Water Issues Committee and on to City Council. So once again, thanks city staff, Craig and Gwen and Carrie and everybody that worked on it, and thank you for the public for the comments, as well as the people on the panel. So thank you very much and have a great day.